All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. I'm Mark Kleinschmidt. I am the president of the Anne Arundel Chamber of Commerce. And again, welcome to this installment of what we're calling our virtual leadership lunch series. This is something that we've put together. It's actually kind of a brainchild of the pandemic, if you will. Last fall, we started these. We thought it was a good way each month to have a discussion about a key issue from the economic or the political world confronting Anne Arundel County. So today we're fortunate to have as our speaker County Executive Stuart Pittman. So again, welcome. The Leadership Lunch Series is brought to us. We were able to do it through and make it free. That was the other thing we thought was real important, communications and keeping the membership informed during this challenging time, and hopefully a lot of that is now behind us as we are moving forward. But our sponsors, why we're able to make it free is because of the support that we've gotten from Live Casino and Hotel, Comcast, and Southwest Airlines, particularly for this series. So thanks to our sponsors for making that happen here. So with that, let me just turn it over to Stephen Brown, who is the chairperson of our legislative
Thank you, Mark. Just real briefly, I want to thank everybody for getting in here. We have our legislative committee of the chamber up and running. We are constantly reviewing county issues, state issues, local Annapolis issues, and local jurisdictional issues as well. So if any of you would like to get involved, feel free to shoot me or Mark an email. We'd love to have you. We meet on the first Thursday of every month, and it's a pretty active and vocal group. So certainly if anybody would like to get involved, do so. That being said, County Executive, we're really excited to have you here. Thank you for taking the time. And we certainly look forward to being an open and positive forum for communications between you and the business community. So with that, that's my spiel, and I'd love to turn it over, I guess, now to County Executive Pittman. Right, Mark?
Yeah, so County Executive, before you jump in, just real quick, from the Chamber's standpoint, we've, again, tried to maintain our communications outreach to our membership. A couple of things that we've done, we've restructured our committees and gotten them revamped. The legislative committee that Stephen Brown's heading up is active and involved. We've launched a new workforce development committee, and our member development committee, and our economic development committee. So we're actually going to be having an economic development forum over the summer. And in the fall, we are going to be getting back together in person for the next installment of the Business Hall of Fame. So we'll have 4 people who will be inducted into that. So that's an ongoing process. Monday, we had our first in-person event, and I'm really happy to report we had a good outing at the Preserve at Eisenhower, the newly renovated golf course out in Crownsville. And a lot of that was done with the county's leadership and money. They've done a great job out there in terms of making a fun golf course, but also the environmental protection elements and the increased amount of wetlands there. So that was a good experience. So we're excited to see the economy moving up, opening up, and we continue to move forward. So with that, let me just introduce our speaker. As many of you know him personally. Stuart Pittman was elected in 2016, and he came to office with the governing philosophy to encourage 2018. Well, I gave you 2 extra years.
Yeah, well, the good and the bad of those years, right? Yeah.
Well, his philosophy was to engage communities and get every sector involved and have transparency and make data decisions. And we all encountered the great uncertainties of what I call the COVID-19 recession. So the county executive had to work with multiple constituencies to keep things moving on a public safety, public health side, and also the economic side. So over the last 14 months, it's been a struggle, but the good news is a lot of that hard work and dedication has paid off, and we are starting to emerge, pretty significantly emerge. So business activity is up, and I know a lot of us are very, very optimistic about that. So how about some virtual applause for the moving forward out of the pandemic? So with that, I'd like to turn it over to the county executive. And prior to that, just say thank you for your leadership and hard work in getting us to this point. So, Mr. County Executive, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you, everybody. The chamber has been invaluable during this last year as a check-in, and I know it's been very difficult for all the chambers in this county, even to survive financially through this time with revenues down. But I'm pretty optimistic, and I feel like we got good times ahead. So I want to talk mostly about Plan 2040, the land use plan that we just passed, and the budget that is now before the council, and those things in the context of growth, economic development, jobs, and some of the things that we're working on. So the folks who have heard me speak, you've heard me talk about the basic principles that guide us, and those are restoring trust in government, something that my staff is directed to do every single day, every department. That drives a lot of the work that we do, the attitude that we have throughout county government, that we really got to get people on board and engaged so that they're a part of the decisions that we make, and that includes the chambers and all the business community. Create a economic opportunity for all. And I was out at the Amazon warehouse today out by BWI, at BWI actually, and we were adding a stop for the county connector, the public transit. A third of their workers actually use public transit to get to and from work every day. And that is an example of creating economic opportunity for all. And it's an area where we got a lot of work to do in this county, but housing is another, education is another, and then implementing smart growth policies. And we'll talk about that in the context of Plan 2040, really trying to get this county to figure out its path forward. I don't think it's a secret in this county that residents complain about traffic and overcrowded schools, and more than anything else. And so we've had to look for a path forward so that we can grow in a way that is managed, in a way that makes sense, fiscally responsible, and still improves the quality of people's lives. And I know you all are about that in all of your businesses. And then finally, promoting health and wellness. I really do think that government should be judged by the health and the wellness of the people that it serves. And we got tested on that. And I think our health department has done a fantastic job through the pandemic, but we have lots of work to do on that front as we move forward. So Plan 2040, it's the state mandated general development plan. We do it, we have been doing it every 10 years. Bill passed requiring us to do it every 8 years. We may go back to 10 years. The state requires 10 years, but it passed the county council just this last week. And I feel good about it. It was a difficult process, and I know a lot of you weighed in on it. That I think is the most principles haven't changed much since the 2009 plan of smart growth, real focus on equity and green as well. And that's always been the case in Anne Arundel County and in most general development plans. But where I think the county may have failed in the past was the community engagement side of it. And those of you who've done development projects know that when the community is fighting you every step of the way, it's hell. And if the community is on board, things move forward a lot more efficiently. And so we did small area planning in Anne Arundel County in the early 2000s, and communities were engaged in that process. There were 16 of them. And then they kind of got set aside, and the subsequent work on zoning, particularly, and also even on the general development plans after that, didn't necessarily reflect what was in those community plans, and people were frustrated. And that was sort of what we talk about when we say trust in government. They felt like they lost some trust there. So I knew that I needed to restart small area planning. The former county executive made a commitment to that as well at the end, and the county council passed a bill saying there would be small area planning of some sort. So we call it region plans. We went from 16 to 9. It's going to be in a cycle that's going to go through the 10-year planning cycle or 8-year planning cycle for the GDP. And the first 3 of the 9 areas will be starting their work soon. We are going to create stakeholder advisory committees in each of these areas. And the first three are West County, the farthest west part of the county, the farthest eastern part of the county, the peninsula's northeast, and then the Annapolis Peninsula. And then the second and third groups will come after that. So the way that these groups were empowered was that comprehensive rezoning doesn't take place until after the region plans are done. So it was a bit of a jolt, I think, to some people to find that the rezoning process wasn't all going to happen at once after the GDP, but some rezoning probably will take place, and that's okay if it's appropriate. But I think that we took a major step forward in empowering people, and now in empowering them, they have to be responsible, and we have to get the right people at the table, and they have to buy into smart growth and recognize that that we do need to improve the quality of people's lives with the things that we build. And we absolutely need more affordable housing. We need workforce housing really at every income level. And that's an area where it's not always popular, but I believe we have to push forward. Anybody who runs a business knows that you need to have people at all income levels as customers and as employees, and we have to make housing possible for that, as well as transportation. So, and then in terms of since we have business people on this call who have to deal with county government, whether you'll want to or not, I was a farmer for many years and was frustrated as could be with dealing with county government on permitting and advocacy of policies that made it more difficult to do business. And so one of the frustrating things has been in permitting, particularly recently, but probably always, that it takes a heck of a long time. And you sometimes don't know what the outcome is going to be when you apply. And so we recognize right now that, especially in inspections and permits, staffing levels are low. We have a lot of vacancies. Workforce was getting older and was planning to retire, and that's happening. And bringing people in, we haven't done quickly enough, and we're working on that. But probably more importantly is that we're shifting to an all electronic system. Finally, most counties are way ahead of us on this, and it's one of the reasons we hired Steve Ziegler, because he'd been through that process in OPZ, Plan and Zoning. And that is underway. And the transition is difficult. Right now is difficult. And so we are allowing third-party inspections and virtual inspections to help to get us through this time right now where it's been really difficult. But in general, even in our county code, we need to create some more flexibility and remove some of the policies that are making it difficult. So the Glen Burnie overlay for zoning was an example that passed the council even before the GDP, and we see that as a model that we can use in the areas where we want to encourage growth and development. A lot of those are transit areas. Transit-oriented development is a part of the smart growth vision, and we're working with many to do that at Odenton, BWI, near Laurel, and at the end of the light rail at Cromwell Station in that area north of Glen Burnie. So all of those are things that I think are going to be helpful to continue to grow the economy, and I'm going to be meeting with not only each of the 9 regions, but also stakeholder groups. So you'll be seeing a lot of me if you're involved, whether it's in the chambers, whether it's with the builders, commercial and residential. I'll be out and about a lot talking about what's in the plan and how we move forward, what steps we need to take, and listening to you all about how to do that. So the other part of that Plan 2040 talks about, as well as economic development, and our team at Economic Development has done really, I think, amazing work during the pandemic. They've been creative. They've done new things. 1,932 grants. That was as of a couple of weeks ago. It may have gone up since we started the new nonprofit grant program, but really close to 2,000 individual grants to individual businesses in the county to help them get through this time. And then over at Workforce Development, they've also stepped up and done things they'd never done before, One was the humanitarian relief program, where they gave out 7,000 separate $500 debit cards. A lot of them were to restaurant employees, to people who've been impacted by the pandemic. We really needed to reach to the bottom of the economy at a time when unemployment system was kind of, there were a lot of gaps in that, a lot of problems there. So I feel good about where we're heading with those two agencies working together, with those two agencies connected with all of our other agencies, with the federal support that's been coming in, with the focus on families and families with kids in particular, with some of the assistance. I know that we need a workforce that is healthy and available and able to get to work and has childcare for the kids. Hopefully soon we'll have their kids in school rather than having to be home with their kids. A lot of folks out of the workforce as a result of that right now. So hopefully you're in touch with economic development and workforce development. There are frontline people there for you, and let us know if you have needs there. And then finally, the budget, before we get on to questions. We little bit of history on budgets since I was elected. Each year it's been a little bit different, and I think we're in a very good place right now. And the first year we came in and we saw some needs. We felt that we needed to, on public safety and education particularly, make sure that pay was competitive with the region, and increase some staffing to reduce classroom sizes and get some more police officers on the street, and make sure that our fire vehicles were staffed adequately. So these were long-standing demands by the public, and we actually raised both the income tax and the property tax slightly in our budget that first year to be able to meet those needs. Infrastructure was another big one. So we did a 0.1% increase in the income tax to fund $250 million in our PPI fund, permanent public improvements, that's helped us to catch up with our backlog of infrastructure needs. And we were able to deliver on in those agencies, I think, pretty well, and get us to a point that we can move forward and people feel like they're getting the services they need. And it's our tax rate, still fourth lowest in the state on the income tax at 2.81. That's where we are right now, and that's where we're staying in this budget. All the central Maryland counties other than us are at 3.2, the state max. And then on the property tax side, we are at 93 point. So we lowered it cents per $100 of value. So we lowered it very slightly as a result of the revenue cap in this budget. Not enough to do much. I don't think you could even get dinner on that, but maybe a cup of coffee or two. But we're basically following what the revenue cap requires on the rate. So that was our first budget. And then the second budget was COVID. COVID was just coming on, and we projected $60 million less in revenue than we had earlier projected. And so we tightened our belts. And that put us in a position for this year's budget where we had $100 million, over $100 million as surplus left over, because we budgeted conservatively. And the economy, fortunately, did better than was projected. So by all of the economists, I think, or most of them. And so what we did with that money was set ourselves up for the future fiscally as a county. We increased funding to our revenue reserve fund. We've raised the cap. So it used to be that we could only go up to 5% on our revenue reserve. We're raising that to 6%, and we're working to get there. Bond rating agencies will like that. Our pension fund, we projected lower returns, so that we had to invest to do that. So we went from a projected 7.45% to a 7%. And bond rating agencies love that too. So if the economy isn't as good, we're still okay on that. And then on debt affordability, which is the amount of money that the economists and our staff projects that we can safely afford to borrow for our capital projects, that was being overspent by $76 million in the budget before I came in. And we lowered it in the first year some, then the second year, and this year we got it down below zero. So we're actually 12 million below affordability on our capital projects. And then 65 million we put into pay as you go, upfront pay instead of borrowing for capital projects. So as the bond rating agencies look at us, I think we're looking pretty darn good. What, the theory is that when the sun's shining is when you fix your roof, not when it's raining. So we set ourselves up for the future. And it's a budget that delivers on a lot of needs as well. So a year ago, I would have thought this is going to be a terrible time. We're going to be cutting the budget left and right. And then thanks to help from the federal government, stimulus, and the way the economy ended up happening, it's not that way at all. So it's not a bad time to be county executive as a result of that. That's why I'm optimistic. I mean, I think you all hopefully are seeing as things have reopened, that people are eager to go out and eat. People are eager to spend money, and hopefully they've saved some money and they're ready to spend it, and it's going to help a lot of our industries. So I think I'll stop with that and respond to questions or comments.
Well, great. Thank you for that. It's a great overview about looking at where we are or where the process is for the GDP, and the same with the budget. And I guess there's actually hearings tonight still, as that's literally being moving along. So if folks have questions, let's do this. If you could type them into the chat box, and we can get them that way. And I'll try and call on the people who asked the question, but just so I know who to call on. But to kind of get things started, let me kind of stay in the budget world here and ask a little bit about the status. I guess the American Rescue Plan had been enacted in Washington and has allocated $115 million that Anne Arundel would get. What's the process in allocating that money, and has it been established yet?
Yeah, so we're referring to it as ARPA these days.
ARPA, okay.
American Rescue Plan Act, the new acronym of the day. And yeah, we just got our first installment, which is 52 million. And then they give you the second installment, another 52 million in a year, May of next year. And fortunately, we have until the end of 24, calendar year 24, to spend it. So this is money that 3.5 years to get it out on the streets. And what we did in our budget was we actually did program 18 million of it. And that was programmed at the department. Maybe only needed, but we've got that there. An alternative shelter we created for people experiencing homelessness at a hotel, and continuing that, and training for paramedics in the fire department, which is much more expensive than I ever would have realized. So we've got a lot more going into that paramedic training, and some sewer and water infrastructure. So most of it is going to be determined, and we like that. We are going to be talking to a lot of folks and listening to a lot of folks about what the needs are, and allocating that money as we go. But so the rest of everything that I talked about in the budget is without that money. So that puts us in an even more secure position budget-wise. Makes it less likely that there will ever be a tax increase, at least in the near future.
So I didn't realize it came in the two tranches. So that's great, because it does create some fiscal cushion for the county, which is. But you also know it's coming, so you can also plan. So that's a great thing. So, would the chamber, like Steve Brown is saying, we use it as a forum. If you want to hear suggestions on where we might be able to allocate some of those funds in terms of, could be infrastructure projects or the like. Kind of another, jumping over to the kind of.
I thought you were going to give me a list. I was ready to write it down.
Well, we can give you a list.
Sure,
if you like, we'll get some capital project ideas, and we can certainly send them over. But talk a little bit, going back to the GDP and issues in that, and plans are going to roll out. Affordable housing is a big issue, and any thoughts on how that might be approached? I mean, and philosophies on that, or is that something that's going to be coming out of the GDP? Because we've certainly seen a spike in the cost of building a home because of the cost increase of lumber and various supplies, which has also driven up the revenue, or the value of all the existing homes. So affordability now becomes an issue. So what is the future for an affordable housing policy?
That's a good question. I mean, there is a plan that gets sent to HUD every year that is done by our ACDS, Anne Community Development Services. But I feel like we need to be a little bit more specific, and we need to be a lot more aggressive. And I want to thank the Chamber for always being an advocate for affordable housing. I think it was way back in 2008, maybe, or 4, I can't remember now, that the Chamber did some work on this and recommended that we do some sort of moderately priced dwelling unit workforce housing set aside on new development. And that is under discussion. There were 2 bills that passed. One was a workforce housing bill already that creates a density bonus for workforce housing. And the other was a fair housing bill. And then the 4th piece that we want to do is a affordable housing trust fund, so that we have a pot of money that can be very flexible to make it possible to bring projects through. We have projects right now that are low-income housing tax credit, and with the increased cost of lumber and all building supplies, their numbers aren't working anymore, and we don't want to lose them. So we may have to provide some help. So an affordable housing trust fund is the last part of that. And it's possible that we use some ARPA funding for that, to seed that fund. We also are looking at transitional housing needs. I mean, the homeless providers always say that it's that first step so hard. They work with people, they provide counseling, and they get income. And a lot of homeless folks have some income. And it's just been really hard for them to find the places where people can be, and possibly with some services. So we have been exploring tiny homes, single room occupancy. There's been also discussion of legislation for, as Annapolis did, for accessory dwelling units in the county. A bit more controversial, but so some of these things are controversial, and you tend to get some opposition. People don't oppose it as much if they know it's not going in their neighborhood. There's a lot of NIMBYism with affordable housing, and these are all things that we have to confront. But those are a few of the initiatives moving forward. And I got to say that our team at ACDS and our housing authority, the Anne Arundel County Housing Authority, has developed a lot of housing and is continuing to try to put projects together. And so we have good people. And the development community has realized that Anne Arundel County is open for business now on affordable housing. So we've got more applications for the low-income housing tax credits than we've had in the past. So we just have to keep pushing forward, whether it's popular or not. We know it's right. It's right for the economy, and we could really use the support of the Chamber on those efforts.
Well, as a segue, we've got a question from Carl Snowden, who just joined our board this last 2 months ago. But Carl was asking, would you be willing to meet with the Chamber regarding developing plans for creating affordable housing?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, this is something that we've talked about at the board level, and we've heard from employers too as an issue. So we would welcome that opportunity to chat with you and be part of that conversation. Good. So we've got moving along here. I've got a question from Brian Haas. So rather than myself reading it out, let's get a little interactive here. So Brian, and let him ask.
Hi, how are you? My name is I'm with Maryland Doors, based in Annapolis. So I also live in the county, but transportation in the county, as you know, is an issue. People from South County accessing workforce and jobs in Annapolis and North County. It's very timely, and there's not a lot of it in South County. And so is there any, what's going on with that? If you could maybe speak on that.
Yeah, so the best place to look at what we want to do is a plan called Move Anne Arundel. You can get that on the Office of Transportation website. And there is a plan to increase public transit. We're actually, in our capital budget, we have a transit center at Parole that is budgeted. And but a transit center without bus lines isn't worth much. We've got to increase that. And the bottom line is it does have to be subsidized. Once you get enough riders, you don't have to subsidize it as much, but we have to commit to it because it's not only good for the people who need that economic opportunity, but it's good for the environment. It's good for getting cars off the road. People complain about traffic more than anything else. So as far as South County goes, we started this circulator a couple of years ago and it wasn't used much. So now it's an on-call service and that is being used more. And I think getting the word out is part of the issue there. But they will come pick you up in a van and take you to where there is a real bus line at Edgewater. There's one outside. I actually took the bus, public transit from where I live in almost down near Harwood to Annapolis. And it took me most of the day, but I got there and it's not good enough.
Right. So yeah, to get to Annapolis to work. So if you figure somebody's got to be at work at 8, 9 o'clock, they probably have to start their day very early. So yeah, some work on that would probably help the workforce as well as everything else that you mentioned. Yeah,
you're going to be seeing it in the budget in the coming years, and it'll be interesting to see how it's received by the council because we're going to have to continue to invest in adding bus lines.
Right. Are there any committees where community members can join to help that effort? Yeah,
we have the Transportation Commission that is staffed by the Office of Transportation. So you can go to aacounty.org or aacounty.org and look up boards and commissions, and there's all of the commissions, but transportation is one of them. And it's got everything from who's on it to when the next openings are for new positions.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Brian, for that question. Here's another area kind of moving on to something a little different. There's been, I had the opportunity to serve on the City Dock, and I guess I still am the City Dock Action Committee, and all the work that's been done in Annapolis, working to replace the Hillman Garage, and then looking at a reimagining and a redevelopment of City Dock. And one of the tools which I thought was very innovative is the Resiliency Authority. And I don't know that a lot of people are familiar with that, but I do know it was passed by the General Assembly, and we're now in the process of it being set up. So what is the status of the Resiliency Authority and it being launched?
Yeah, well, hopefully it's going to be formally created by the vote of the county council at their next meeting. So there are amendments that were just introduced that they're considering, but and then once they pass it, we have in our budget $500,000 this year to seed it, to hire an executive director and set up the office of this authority. We hope to have that done end of this year, this calendar year, and then a board will be created 2022. Is really to be able to, we know that we're going to have to do some capital projects dealing with sea level rise and flooding. And it's not just on the coast, it's throughout the county where we have some of these flooding issues. And we want to keep them off budget and to allow for some creative financing of them. And sometimes that means that a community will contribute a higher level to a solution, or some businesses might contribute a higher level to that solution. Or when you're looking at City Dock, and the raising of it, creating that beautiful public space, which is really the poster child project that we're all excited about in Annapolis. The revenue from the parking garage. I mean, we can be creative with an authority, and experts are going to be part there. We've been working on a resilience plan for the county where they identified areas of the highest danger, flooding and all of that, and start to look at public infrastructure, especially that is threatened, and come up with a list of projects from that. Long term, but and sort of daunting when thinking about the potential costs of some of this, which is why it was important to separate it out into this authority.
Well, I know in Annapolis with the sunny day flooding and the increased incidence of that and the impact it has on business, and that has to play out in on other coastal towns and areas too. So having the infrastructure or the ability to do something to address it is key. The board, how is that selected? You get to pick the mayor does 3, and then you get to pick 9 people. And is there any criteria for who could be on the board?
I forget, to be perfectly honest, what the breakdown is. Yeah, I do know that the appointments are primarily myself and the mayor, with us having more. And I can't remember. There may be somebody else. Do you remember? Pete Barron's on the call. What the categories of people are?
Yeah, I can send it around with they want some expertise in finance, folks with experience in building things, and some resilience experts, but the executive city.
Okay.
Okay, and then I've got kind of changing gears. Another question is kind of going back to COVID, but we don't want to, in looking at getting people vaccinated. The question was some other communities are using some of the stimulus money to create incentives for people to get vaccinated. Is that something that the county might be looking at?
We've been talking a lot about that with the health department, and there's a real debate over that, whether if you start creating incentives, whether then people are going to rely on the incentives versus on an obligation to end this pandemic and do their civic duty to end the pandemic by getting vaccinated, or whether there should be more work done with vaccine passports and safe spaces, where there are places you can go if you're vaccinated, but not if you can't. I know some businesses are doing that, and I actually encourage that. It's always the rub is how do you know whether people are actually vaccinated, and are we allowed to ask? And employers are allowed to ask. The county is allowed to ask. Our mask policy in county buildings that we're about to put out is going to say, if you are not vaccinated, you should wear a mask when you're indoors amongst others at work. But if you are not vaccinated, you don't need to. And we do have the right to ask you and to enforce it. So that's a big debate over what kind of tactics to use. Certainly we need to do a lot of marketing, which we are, and we've contracted with a firm. You've probably seen some of the nicer ads and videos that we're putting out on give it a shot, take a shot. But we haven't made decisions about whether to do like the state employees, the $100. We're not quite there yet. We're still having that conversation.
Okay, and then another one's kind of COVID related. The outdoor dining has become pretty popular, and a lot of restaurants have become accustomed, I guess you could say, accustomed to operating that way. Any thought on allowing that to stay in place longer? Because I know it was under the emergency order that they had the authorization to do the outdoor dining, but now some customers still want to be socially distanced, and there seems to be uncertainty what the future is of outdoor dining, temporary outdoor dining anyway.
Yeah, and you may have read in the Capitol about that recently. So we have been we've known that we wanted to continue the outdoor dining, regardless of what happens with whether it's the governor's state of emergency or our state of emergency, which disappears when the governor's does. This is the last thing that we've had because we don't have restrictions anymore. The only thing that state of emergency in the county is doing is keeping that outdoor dining legal, because you don't need the kinds of permits that you would normally need, the kinds of parking. So we've got a bill that has just been introduced to the council this morning and will be voted on. Councilman Volke has tried to remove the emergency order, and we said, well, wait a minute. This is going to go away if we do. So he introduced a bill. The two bills are very similar. We're going to end up making it as the lawyers are arguing about who's actually allows more people. We think ours allows more people. He thinks his allows more people. Whatever we do, it's going to be the one that allows the most people under these tents, that's still safe. And the council is going to come together, and it's going to happen. It extends it out until the end of October, so that we get the restaurants through this summer and the fall season. Beyond that, then we have to go back to all these regulations on parking and everything, and decide how to move forward from there. But yeah, I talk pretty regularly to James King, that, the guy who organized the restaurant groups, to sue me. And at the end of the hearing, we actually became friends, because I think we both listened to each other before the judge and thought, oh, okay, he's coming from a good place. So he was very clear that people are going into these restaurants and they want the outdoor dining, first, because they're still nervous about it inside. So it would be insane to take that away at this point. So we won't.
That's great. And I think you've done a good job trying to be flexible with all of it. And it's just such uncharted waters, and trying to keep the businesses afloat. And a lot of them struggled, some didn't make it, but now there's that opportunity to reemerge. So thank you for that. I've kind of gone through the questions that I was sent, and in anything in the chat room. So let me just, before we kind of start to wrap up, does anyone else have anything they might want to ask County Executive Pittman?
I had a question that I put in the chat room, and I'd like to just ask the county executive. The chamber from time to time may have issues or concerns. Who would you designate as the point person or liaison that chamber members could contact to have any of their concerns or issues addressed? Who would be the point person?
James Kitchen from Community Engagement Constituent Services had been working with all of the chambers during this year to try to help meet their needs, and will continue to do some of that. But you can also go straight to Pete Barron, especially if it's a legislative issue. And then you can go, in my office, Janine Frattantonio is the scheduler. And so you can get to me through her, or you can get to me directly if you can. We're pretty much open. I mean, we don't want to just limit you to one person. I mean, we want you to go to the people who can make things happen for you. So, go straight to Ben Burge at Economic Development, go straight to Workforce Development and every department. And if you're having trouble, let me know.
Okay. Does anyone else have anything?
I do. This is Stephen Hyatt. Sorry again for my camera not working. You mentioned, Mr. County Executive, that you're going to hold these stakeholder meetings for post GDP, I guess, implementation of goals, policies, and strategies. Could you elaborate on the timing and structure of those meetings?
Yeah, I actually have a meeting with Plan and Zoning to break the news to them that I want to do this next week. Every time I do a lot of these meetings, and I don't like to overwork my staff too much, but to figure out what role they're going to play and what role my office is going to play. But I know that I mean, I want to sit down particularly with MBIA, NAOP, who do a lot of the development work, because they have the most direct they're affected the most by what we do. Beyond that, I mean, I'm open. We'll be doing some outreach. We're going to do them by region, so people can participate in a region. So if you're doing business in that region, then I encourage you to come, and we'll get those out publicly. But we're just talking about it now. I mean, I figure it's going to be over the next 6 months, get to all 9 regions in every group, but particularly 3 months, probably more aggressively.
Thank you.
Okay. We've covered a lot of ground. Anyone else? Last call for questions, if you will. So, all right. Well, we'll see you none. Like to say thank you, County Executive Pittman, for making the time and today to kind of share your thoughts about where we are and where we're going, and also for working with the chambers and this chamber and all chambers over the last 14 months, which certainly have been an adventure for many. And again, we're all in this together, and hopefully we're on the other side of this pandemic, and we can start to get back to the way of life that we all know and love here in Anne Arundel County. So,
Thanks, everybody.
all right, everyone, have a great afternoon, and thank you for spending the time. Take care.